take advantage of the platform I'm building on top of.
That's exactly it. And that's kind of how that's how we view it. Like, hey, just use your phone, just drive your car, right? Don't worry about that. And that concept has never.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Vega Cloud's podcast. I'm Kris Bliesner, CEO and co-founder of Vega Cloud. Vega Cloud, if you're not familiar, our mission in life is to help you get the most out of your investments in cloud infrastructure. And so people spend a lot of money on infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. We want to make sure that they get the most out of that spend. We follow the FinOps framework in that regard. So you're going to see the Vega Cloud platform do things like help you do cost allocation, chargebacks, showbacks, those kinds of things, which we'll talk a little bit about today with Jabari here. I'm going to introduce him in just a second. And then we help on the optimized side as well. That's where really the Archera stuff shines. So we're excited to talk about what they've been working on. And then we also do operate, which is unique as well. And there's a little bit of crossover there as well with the Archera team. So with that, I wanted to spend just a second and introduce Jabari Norton, Chief Revenue Officer at Archera. Jabari, why don't you introduce yourself to the folks here?
Yeah. Hey, Kris. So thanks for having me on the podcast. So I'm Jabari Norton. I lead all of our revenue functions here at Archera. So been here as part of the company for almost a year. So going on a year coming up as we kind of cross over the new year. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we do, providing kind of the first of its kind cloud commitment insurance. And that's a mouthful, but we'll talk about what that does. But this is my 9th early stage startup, so I've done a lot of these, but really excited about what we're bringing to offer, really just something that's never been done before and really changes the game from customers. Coming to you from a pink room to match the logo a little bit, so should have a little fun today.
Love it. Well, and I want to get into kind of what Archera does, but before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about why we're here in our careers and what we've been through. Having managed optimization for over a decade, for me anyway, I see a common thread here of folks that struggle with simple things like, hey, how do I think about committing to these cloud providers? You've told me that it's sort of a pay as you go sort of thing, and then now you're saying I got to buy for 3 years or sign a large agreement, and there's just this, I wouldn't call it mistrust, but I think in general just this lack of enthusiasm around commitments. And so we see that all the time where we walk into enterprises that are less than 90% covered, maybe even less than 50% covered from a committed use discounts perspective or those kinds of things. And so maybe talk a little bit about your experience of why Archera is hitting this sweet spot in the market, because it is something that we've struggled with of how do we get our clients and customers to understand that there's a better way to think about this stuff. Help talk about kind of the origin story around Archera a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you 2 pieces of background. So one is kind of the origin story of Archera. So Archera started 5 years ago, and really it came out of actually our co-founder and CEO, Aran, who actually worked as a former Amazonian, actually in Amazon. And as Kris, you may know, or others who are listening in, AWS has these 6-pagers or PRFAQs where people come and address new ideas and challenges that customers are having and kind of a new way to kind of do things. And his idea was helping customers to underwrite their commitments, right? Because the system and the cloud right now is extremely rigid. After on demand, it's 1 year and 3-year commitments, and that didn't fit, certain use cases, whether that was spiky workloads or seasonal or like transient RDS instances, things like that. And so he took that PRFAQs, sent it up through Amazon. It actually got turned down from finance and legal side, and it's really the challenge is that AWS couldn't underwrite a customer's commitment. That's the binary commitment between them and the customer. So we took a bias for action, which is one of the AWS LPs, and started a business. And so we spent the first few years of the company really learning how to underwrite a commitment that's never been underwritten, right? So if you think of it like with a car analogy, we had to crash a few cars to kind of figure out how to really do that and put the right guardrails on that. And we've really come out and brought something to market that's really unique, really revolutionary. And then going to your point about customers, there's only a certain point that they get to where they're comfortable in committing, and they're kind of riding on the edge of that where the overcommitment then comes into play. And nobody wants to have this overcommitment where they have these, either savings plans or RIs in place, and which they don't actually aren't using the resources for. And that's really where Archera comes in, allows them to extend that commit as far as they can get to, especially when there's a lot of uncertainty. And then we cover the waste. So we get rid of that challenge around overcommitment. We get rid of that hand wringing. And that's what we're bringing to market. And then finally, I did this 3 times actually inside of a large ISV. So I worked at a very large ISV. I negotiated and helped negotiate 3 large EDP PPAs with AWS. And there's just a lot of hand wringing. We always undercommitted. And I just look back to could we have committed to more, gotten more savings, and really helped margin in the bottom line as we're, innovating in the cloud.
Yeah, and I think what's also relevant here too is kind of the stage where we're at, where I feel like enterprises are typically, at least the folks that we run into, are 30 to 40% migrated into the cloud, kind of in that range. And I think we all recognize they're not necessarily going to get to 100%, but I do think we're going to get to 50, 60% migrated. And so that means we're sort of roughly halfway through the migration pattern, right? And so there's a lot of stuff coming, and we know, having been in the business, it's going to take a long time to get there, right? Migration doesn't happen overnight, new builds don't happen overnight, so there's a lot to be done there. But I think one of the things that I've always found interesting about undercommitting or worrying about commits in general was just people having a good sense of how do we forecast out what we're doing and where we're going, and maybe talk a little bit about how Archera can help in that regard, both from the forecasting perspective, but also de-risking, right? So being able to say, hey, listen, you don't actually have to get that right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's amazing that you talked about migrations, right? So if we kind of just take the migration use case, right, you're bringing a workload in to the cloud. First and foremost, you want to get that workload in, and then what you do is you fully optimize from a usage standpoint. That takes time, that takes engineering effort, that takes planning, and you may not get it right kind of day one, but every single, minute, hour that you're running that new workload that's now in the cloud, it's costing you money. And so that's really where Archera comes in. And so we're able to do rate optimization. So, right, there's this concept of usage, right, that Vega Cloud does and helps with in an amazing way. And then you marry that with, rate optimization, which is really what we do. And so with our insured commitments, what we allow customers to do is short of a period of about 3 days, with customers are able to make those commitments. So they can put, an insured commitment, save some money versus on demand, and not have to feel like they have this long-term debt over their head. They become more comfortable with the workload. Maybe they move to a 1-year commitment, and then they finally feel fully in control. They go with a 3-year commitment, right? And that just allows them to kind of move down that journey as they get more and more confidence on that specific set of workloads, because all workloads aren't created equal. So whether it's a migration use case or the other use cases that are brought forward, Archera really provides a unique way of doing that, but still keeping the control in the hands of the customer. So we're not arbitraging or taking over customers' accounts or anything like that. We're just truly underwriting commitments, allowing them to innovate faster as a business.
This is a really unique point, I think, because a lot of what we see in the market is folks trying to do something different, right? So they're going to take over, manage something different. You have to buy a different thing, right? Something different owned. But you guys actually use out-of-the-box concepts here. So reserved instances, savings plans, those kinds of things. And that's an interesting, I think, approach to this, where customers are already using those things. So they're already familiar with them. They already know what the drawbacks are, right? And they know, again, I think most folks are aware of what their issues are in terms of committing. Right, and so being able to address that issue by underwriting is huge.
Yeah, and that's really what we do. And so we really take a very consultative approach. I mean, we have an amazing FinOps team and our customer success team that actually works with customers as they go through that process. And we really want to meet the customers where they are, right? So customers come in and maybe they have some compute that's heavily optimized. But maybe they're under optimized on databases or other types of services, et cetera. And so we want to meet them where they are and really help them and really understand, okay, so what's your reservation strategy? Okay, you'd like to cover 3-year savings plans for most of this infrastructure. Great. Okay, is there a certain enough that's running on demand? Why? And we're really empathetic about that, because they don't really want to. They want to save, right? But it's just there's unpredictability there. And then really, how can we then take that, if we were able to put a commitment in place for that, underwrite that to ensure that if those resources go away or if there's a migration, that we're covering any of that negative savings or waste. It allows them to free up those capabilities and then drive additional savings. So it's really a new way for customers to kind of think about it. They're in full control of their commits. And the way I like to say it is to kind of put it into a personal use case is like an iPhone, right? So we all have iPhones. We're not changing the way you use the iPhone. It's your iPhone. Some iPhones have Apple Care and some iPhones don't. I am fast and loose with my iPhone. I broke it in New York a few weeks ago, and I needed Apple Care. My wife keeps her iPhone in her purse, which is probably I should keep mine in my pocket more often, so she doesn't need it, right? And so it's really, where is there uncertainty? Let's insure those. And then, but the goal is not to keep insurance on forever.
Right.
The goal is once you have the certainty, remove the insurance, right? Because then you're going to drive the most savings that way. So we really are trying to meet the customers exactly where they are and help take them on the journey together to get more and more coverage in their environments.
Right. Is there a sweet spot that you think that you guys see with your customer base? Like, what's the best kind of ideal profile that or problem that you're solving for folks?
We have customers in all the ranges. So it's, anybody, you have to be running in the cloud, right? So to start, so that's first and foremost. But we kind of do see a couple, common things that we see. So we see on one end of the spectrum, a lot of startups, right? There's a lot of unpredictability in their business. They're growing really fast. They're onboarding new customers. Maybe those contracts are a year or month to month or et cetera. It's really hard to put these 1 year, 3 year commitments on this infrastructure as you're just kind of getting going, right? And so there's a fear of commitment. We help a lot of these companies, right? I think it was just last year, we helped over 150 companies put their first commitments in place with AWS. Like amazing. Like we helped them, kind of get over that hump with our insured commitments. And so we have, startups, a lot of unpredictability that are moving really, really fast to go ahead and do that. And then kind of think on the other end of the spectrum, we have some of the largest like enterprises and ISVs in the world, heavily optimized on things like compute. Like, hey, we got EC2 locked down. We have rolling savings plans. We're good. Where we struggle is, hey, we do a lot of troubleshooting for customers using RDS. And they're kind of transient in nature. They may need to be 2 months, 5 months, 6 months. You can't put, you have to do those with reserved instances. They don't kind of fall into the same space as savings plans. So they're much harder to cover. We can come in with our insured commitments, allow customers to drive some additional savings, still with that unpredictability, and then drive that forward. So really driving those extra coverages. So once again, we kind of help customers that are getting their first set of commitments. We love with really, really large organizations kind of go ahead and do that. And we'll probably put a little bit of a teaser out about our new PPA insurance that we've just launched around that, which is really revolutionary and game changing. That a lot of organizations are super excited about that we're bringing to market.
Yeah, and for folks that don't know, because I'm sure there's some startups listening too, we should probably define EDPs and PBAs for folks so that they know what the terms are and why people struggle with them, right? Because they are very similar to RIs and savings plans, but at a much bigger level, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so AWS has moved to the term PPA. I think EDP is dating myself. That's what we used to talk about back in the day. So Enterprise Discount Program is what it used to stand for. Now it's private pricing agreements. And these private pricing agreements allow customers, they have to qualify. They have to get to a certain amount of spend on an annualized basis to kind of qualify for a PPA. But what a PPA allows them to do is it's generally a multi-year commitment, usually 3 to 5 years in length, where there's a committed spend level every single year that a customer has to commit to, typically sometimes with a little bit of a stair step, especially as they're growing. With that commitment that you get, it's called a 3 or a 5 year, AWS will provide an additional overall discount that layers across everything, across all the services. So it's really a way to layer in a discount. So savings plan RI discounts, fantastic. I layer in a PPA discount, I get even further discounts. But where the rubber meets the road and the challenge is and the hand wringing comes is these are multi-million-dollar commitments. And so, if you think of like a 5 year term, year 1, I have insight. I feel good about it. Year 2, I feel pretty good. Years 3, years 4, years 5 start to get really murky as to, what is that going to look like? What's the, kind of geoeconomical things that are going to happen. How is my business going to change, et cetera. But that's how you maximize your discounts, by pushing those years further and further out in the commitment to like AWS or cloud provider. What we do is we allow customers to underwrite a portion of that. So maybe there's some uncertainty about years 4 and 5, and maybe there's $200,000 of uncertainty or $500,000 of uncertainty. And that uncertainty means is when you've made the commitment, if you don't meet that commitment, there's a shortfall, which means you have to write a check at the end of that. And so we cover that shortfall, reduce the hand wringing, accelerate that entire process that allows the customers to drive much more savings, and then know that they have coverage and a backstop on the back end for us to do that. So this is really revolutionary and game changing on what we're going to do with regards to PPAs. And it's super exciting to work with customers and our AWS teams on this.
And Jabari, any sort of hard and fast rules around how much of the PPA you can underwrite? Is it just AWS today? Like, give me some bounds around kind of how you guys think about the product today.
Yeah, we're generally not covering the entire PPA, right? Because most people have pretty good, certainty around their core commit. I mean, because they're just running it's infrastructure that they're running today. Generally, I would say rough and tough, kind of up to about 20% of any kind of commitment, in any given year that we're looking at. But we're very flexible, right? So we could say, hey, we're going to cover 100,000 in year 3, and we'll bump it to 500,000 in year 4 and year 5. So we meet the customer where there's that uncertainty we have them plug in, we understand their forecast, we help them forecast. And I think the biggest thing, Kris, here is helping the customers forecast and get their arms around what does our demand actually look like. So there's demand plan that they're, used, that's kind of given to them. But also, how do we align that to make sure that that's aligned to what they want? And then they have much more confidence going into that conversation, because everybody uses this and everybody wants them to save, right? Amazon wants them to save. We want them to save. You guys want them to save. And just making sure that we're fully aligned around that. But that demand planning and understanding that. And then it's up to them whether or not the insurance is all opt-in. So everything we've talked about today, which is the amazing part as kind of on the revenue side, is it's all free. They opt into insurance where it makes sense for only a percentage of their commitments, et cetera. Everything else they get to do for free in our platform, even that forecasting and stuff like that. So it's really just kind of a no-brainer and easy for customers to plug in and really see what we can do to help them out.
And I imagine, and you don't certainly have to share anything confidentially, but I imagine on the insurance side too, like there was a lot of education that had to go on in terms of, because in my experience, investors and insurance companies don't always understand cloud concepts or billing concepts or those kinds of things. I mean, how much education did you guys go through on that side of things?
Yeah, so in our last fundraise, it really opened up our capability to really, kind of open the door for our PPA insurance and other pieces. There was a lot of education that Ron, our CEO, had to do. He was spent months on the road really kind of helping educate. Because once again, it's the first of its kind, right? And how do you do this? And how do you help, our back end providers, understand? Because, our entire program is covered by third-party insurers, right? And so we have to have that. And so there's a lot of work. I'm sure there's a podcast all of itself where Ron can tell you about that and they kind of go through. But yeah, there was a lot of work and a lot of education he had to do through that process.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I want to hear a little bit about this money back guarantee stuff. So I know you guys, again, I think one of the things that I love about Archera is that you guys share sort of the mindset that we do at Vega around making things easier for folks, right? So taking away the guesswork, taking away the challenges, to make this stuff work easier, because the reality is a lot of people aren't experts at this stuff. And so we need to, I think as an industry, just make this stuff easier for folks. And so that was one thing that I caught my eye to when we were chatting about what to talk about today was, you guys are really pushing the envelope in terms of, okay, we're going to make this a no-brainer for you. Like talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the way our money back guarantees work, it's actually once again another unique thing that we have. And so, the goal of this is, to your point, how do we make this easy? So let's just say we do one of our guaranteed savings plans. Customer puts that in place around that, and we can actually automate this entire process as far as looking at new infrastructure as it comes online, because we're checking the cost and usage report every single day to see what new infrastructure comes online to make sure that we're always covered. But let's just say a customer decides to apply a plan for, sake of argument, maybe it's a $10,000 a month savings plan. that they actually have. So we put that in place. They maximize savings. They're using our insured commitments. They're past kind of the 30-day period. And so all we're doing is just monitoring that from a rebate perspective. And what we're monitoring for is this savings plan saving the customer money, which is the name of the plan.
Right.
What can happen though is as resources go away, let's just say there's like 20% of the resources that are in the account are being used. They've gone down for whatever reason. Under 20%, under a certain point, your savings plan will do the opposite. You start losing money. It becomes negative because there's a minimum commitment that you have to have. And what we do is, so let's just say it goes into 20%. We cover any negative balance between kind of no savings and now kind of what that commitment is. And we actually just put that back into the customer's account. So think of it like a Venmo. So you put it into the account, they connect their bank account, they pull the money directly out. So essentially they've crashed the car. Oh, we got to pay for the fender. Here we go. You go ahead and you get it and you do that. Now call it month 2, right? Maybe they shut it down for the holidays, right? They bring it back up in January. The savings plan, like all these instances are back up. Savings plan saving the money. They're in a great state. So there's nothing for the customer to have to do. We're constantly monitoring and looking for any of those negative things. And so it's a double benefit. Going back to the PPA conversation, for customers with PPAs, double benefit. Because in that example, if the resources go down to 2,000 on that saving or 20% to that on that savings plan, you're still getting that $2,000,
right,
counting towards their PPA plus getting a check from Archera, double win, right? With regards to that, so it's really a no-brainer when it comes to that, and they just get to manage that constantly. And so we're constantly looking for that, and we automate this entire process. So to the extent that they can set it and forget it, and we can do that for them. And we obviously have guardrails and things like that in the program that we know that what we're underwriting and insuring makes sense. It really makes it really, really easy. And then they can focus on harder problems, like things where they have to touch infrastructure or moving their business forward, things like that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that comes to mind for me is that this is key for migrations, modernization, those kinds of things, because those are the areas where people typically will pull back from a commitment and say, hey, I don't know yet because I'm in the process of moving, or I'm in the process of digitizing something or modernizing an application architecture, whatever it might be. And so I'm in the dev cycle. And I remember this back from my Second Watch days. Like, we would do these build outs and we'd say, okay, well, don't buy any RIs until we're done moving all this stuff, because you don't want to pick the wrong thing or do. And then Amazon came out with convertible RIs, and that created its own challenges. And so there was all this complicated pieces around this, right? And I think that's the other piece. It's a common thing, right? Like, people are always playing with how to build a better mousetrap in terms of better infrastructure, or meet compliance requirements, or availability, performance, whatever it is. That doesn't matter. The reality is it's constantly changing, right? And so I think that's the risk point that people sometimes struggle with a lot around this.
Yeah, and I think that the challenge is you kind of think about the engineers and stuff that you have working on this, or FinOps teams, et cetera. There's I don't know if you 100% want them doing all this financial engineering and modeling with regards to that, because it's really hard to get it right. If you can, to your point, get that rate optimization kind of in place, stop the bleeding, and then as you kind of get to that steady state, you'll be in good shape. I think that's really what we're looking for.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit, shifting gears here for a sec, is Microsoft Azure. It's a different beast than a lot of other cloud providers. You guys, I'm sure, have felt that in product development. We certainly have. Customers look at it differently. It's just a different ball of wax. Talk a little bit about what you guys do for Azure, where you're headed, where the roadmap is going, if you can, just because I think that'll be helpful for our customers that are deep Azure users.
Yeah, so we've actually fully launched Azure. So thanks for bringing that up. We just recently launched our capabilities for that. The program's exactly the same, right? So ensuring RIs and savings plans is what we do. Obviously, we're talking different vernacular. Now you're talking about VMs and other types of things. What makes Azure tricky is onboarding, right? There's so many different types of accounts. How do you onboard, right? And what our teams, we spent a lot of time in development, probably about a year or so, really building this out to make sure the onboarding and that we can onboard all the data and stuff like that. Was they built an enterprise app around it, which is pretty unique. And so it allows us to onboard all these different types, et cetera. So we're open for business when it comes to Azure. We are on, part of Azure Marketplace, things like that. Then also we're going to be launching support for Max as well. So we tie in, savings plans and, RIs and the guarantees that we have there along with Max. And then as we actually get to the end of the year, because I don't know if we're going to talk again on this podcast, we're going to be launching Google as well. So we'll have this for G-codes, et cetera, and committed use, et cetera, on Google. And so we're really excited about this. We're kind of having to meet customers where they are. Obviously, we've started with AWS and first and best is what we continue to do there. But obviously, customers are sitting everywhere. And so really being able to expand this out across any of the three large cloud providers. And then in the future, what we hope to get to is other cloud commitments. So think of things like Databricks, Snowflake, et cetera, where we can help underwrite that, drive more commitment, drive more savings, but then provide that reduction of risk, and take that off of the customers. And so we really see this as a big opportunity to really disrupt, obviously a massive industry, but bring it in really very, very customer obsessed approach as we drive this out.
That's awesome, and I would just echo the importance there. I think what we see is 80% of our customers are multi-cloud, and it could be a smaller chunk in different clouds. It just depends on the customer, but it's important that as we build great tools and platforms here that they support multiple clouds. We keep hearing that from leadership all over the place because it is something where they don't want to have to go do something different for a different platform or whatever. And so it's certainly in the enterprise and in the segment that we focus on, it's very, very common. And so we want to make sure that we can support around that. One of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit today too was around this sort of billing errors and component and how we can layer this stuff in. So we've been, if you haven't seen on our LinkedIn, we've been talking a lot recently around billing error management and correction, those kinds of things. And it sort of starts with one of our differentiations, which is a lot of platforms or tooling in this space was just sort of pulling in billing data and just assuming it was correct. And that was how the industry operated for the last decade plus, right? And we knew better. We've always known better. So we've generated the system from the beginning to always trust but verify, right? And make sure that stuff is actually accurate. And having looked at the PPA environment, these large enterprise agreements, that they're very customizable. They're not one size fits all, and they're very complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things. I would suggest that we don't see a ton of billing errors on smaller customers, so it's not typically a startup or a mid-market small business sort of problem. But it is if you're signing a PPA, if you've got custom commit tiers, if you've got multiple master pairs, whatever it might be, that's going to create a complex billing environment. You're going to have errors, and this came out this June at FinOps X with Uber saying, hey, we found on average 6.7% billing errors. They probably have a really ridiculously complex environment. I get it. We don't see them that high all the time, but we do see them, and I think this is another area where partnering with you guys is really exciting for us because you want to get the data right, and that's about fixing the historics, fixing the go forwards, and then understanding where you're going so that when you're talking about, hey, it's time for me to renegotiate my PPA with AWS or my enterprise agreement with Microsoft or whatever, that I have all the facts, right? I know what I'm spending, where I'm spending it on, and making sure that it's correct from the beginning, so that I'm getting all the value out of it, right? And then layering in on top this new product that you guys have to be able to say, hey, listen, you can actually, because we actually know the data, we've corrected it, and everything's accurate now. Now let's talk about how to plan out for 5 years, right?
Exactly.
And that's a hard thing for a lot of folks to do. If you're not dealing with accurate data in the beginning, and you're just assuming that this you're just going to take your invoices and make sense of them, like that's not necessarily the case, right?
Yeah, and I think adding on to that, the complexity, and because we have a lot of the same partners in common, which is why the partnership works out here, is add the additional billing complexity of having a CSP, with Azure, or having a reseller or disti in place as far as resell. Then there's layers of complexity and whose discount goes where and what is this the discount for and how is this applying. Then there's individual payer accounts. There's payers where there's consolidated payers that are in there. So yes, individual kind of PPA billing errors and stuff like that. We had different types of PPAs at the prior companies, we had PPAs for storage, and we had PPAs for data transfer, and we had PPAs for our standard overall. And then how do those all things? And then you add in like resell, and you add in distribution on top of that. Like it's a nightmare. We've talked to a lot of partners, and they're like, "Can you help us?" Like, well, we can help a little bit, but this is where somebody like Vega Cloud would really come in and really supercharge this thing, because especially as a reseller, right? Not just as an end customer where it's hard, they want to make sure they're getting the bill right. Because if the
Right.
customer pays the wrong amount, they're on the hook for the rest.
Yep.
And so it becomes, even that much more important. And then, God bless you guys for doing this across multiple clouds. That's even harder, right? To kind of get it all together and stuff like that. But yeah, it's an industry-wide problem. It's not going away. It's only going to get worse as more and more users put more and more data into the cloud. But it's something that has to be addressed. And this is, for us, this is why we love partner with you guys for this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. One of the things that I want to end on is a fun story from you guys, and then I'll share one from Vega as well. When we go through the startup journey, we always have a favorite customer or two that's been a part of the journey with you guys. Is there an interaction you can call out that really highlights the value that you guys have been able to create, and then created obviously a lifelong customer for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely some customers, from the early days. So I haven't, kind of been here from the start, but there's definitely a few customers who, just dip their toe in the water with a couple small commitments, and now really use us for the majority of the work that they actually do, whether it's for native commitments, existing commitments. We do have, lifelong customers. I mean, one that comes to mind, we're actually talking about at our SKO. It's like People Connect is one of the lifelong customers that we've had. Sarah and our customer success team, who leads that whole team, has done a great job with those folks. But there's so many of those to recount, and they're just thankful for what we've done, what we've been able to do, because now we've brought in something net new that they weren't able to do themselves. So that's one that comes to mind. There's plenty of these, the hundreds of customers that we actually have, but would love to hear, who's on your list.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have some fun ones back in the day. One of our longest enterprise customers is a company called Itron, and it was funny. Itron is located right around the corner from us in Liberty Lake here, but that's not who we talked to or how we got involved with them, which was funny. So somebody just around the corner, but we didn't actually interact with anyone here in Liberty Lake. They're a worldwide company. So folks in Texas and North Carolina and overseas. And so we talked to a lot of folks. And what was interesting about this whole thing was, again, not heavy committed just yet, partly because they were struggling with how to manage cloud and how to get through the complexities. A lot of groups using it, a lot of teams using it, getting great results, doing a lot of really cool product development, which I really love. Because I think one of the things I love about public cloud is it drives new innovation, right? You can do new cool things. So they were awesome on that side. They just really needed a little bit of help on the optimization and sort of accounting for all the costs and figuring all that stuff out. And so we sort of moved them from this internally Power BI sort of set up into Vega. And it's just been a great sort of partnership long term with them in terms of making sure they have what they need, getting their coverage increased, helping them with commits, those kinds of things. And it's really helped them understand their cloud journey better and where do they want to go. And they're definitely thinking about cloud more in the long term now, which I think is super, super helpful. Like, you're going to be here anyway, right? Like, we know it's not like you're going to repatriate this stuff or sort of go back and build a bunch more data centers. I think everybody's sort of gotten their brain around that. And it's really about, okay, how do we make the most of this? If we're on the journey together, right, and we're here, how do we make the most of it? How do we empower our folks? How do we move faster, take away all the noise, right? And again, that's the theme here that I'm sensing with Archera, with Vega. The combination here is take away the noise, right? Don't make me focus on the complexity that is cloud, because I'm never going to be a cloud expert anyway, so don't force me to, right? Let me go do what it is I do. Let me go develop, let me go innovate in my market, let me go build my product the way I want to do it, those kinds of things, and then help me just take advantage of the platform I'm building on top of.
That's exactly it. And that's kind of how that's how we view it. Like, hey, just use your phone, just drive your car, right? Don't worry about that. And that concept has never been here for cloud, right? Everybody's had to worry about it, right? Because it's, from a budget items perspective, it can be number one, number two, or at least usually in top 5 or top 10. And so that's really what we do. And I think that's a great way to kind of to wrap it up and close it, exactly what we're trying to do. And hopefully more and more customers, as we bring this out together, we can get more and more folks in that spot.
Yeah, totally. Jabari, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We're looking forward to helping customers alongside you guys. So we look forward to a long and prosperous partnership. So thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll do the same. And Kris, thanks for having us on. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate that.
You bet. Thanks.